This video, I'm going to be breaking down Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan to the highly anticipated rematch that goes down on UFC 311. And I'm very excited for this matchup. I feel like this matchup is a couple months old. This fight probably should have happened in October, but Makhachev was dealing with an injury. Tsarukyan, I think he was still suspended for punching a fan at UFC 300. So that's kind of the reason why we didn't see this fight in 2024. But I mean, it's still happening in January 2025. So I'm very, very excited for this matchup. And in this video, I'm gonna talk about this matchup and who I think wins. Like, I feel like you can break down this fight in many different ways, but I think it's a lot simpler than what some MMA fans are making it out to be. I think that Arman Tsarukyan does present a different challenge to Makhachev, but ultimately, I think the question lies, is it enough? Is it enough to beat Makhachev? And, spoiler alert, I do not think so. I do not think that Arman Tsarukyan is good enough right now to beat Islam Makhachev. Arman is an elite grappler. He has an amazing leg kicking game. He has nasty ground and pound, nasty elbows. He has fast hands. Doesn't really have the greatest boxing. Doesn't really throw a lot in combinations. But he's very explosive. He's powerful enough to knock you out if he lands the right shot. But even with all that said, ultimately, I think he's still a little too green for Makhachev. And that's not to, like, I'm not the biggest, Islam Makhachev glazer, all right? This is not somebody that's saying, oh, Islam is, he can never lose, he's perfect and all this stuff. I see a lot of MMA fans saying that, especially if you're a big, like, Dagestani fan. I'm not that guy. This is a guy that was very critical of his performance against Dustin Poirier. Like, Islam himself is not coming off the most impressive performance against Dustin Poirier. And that is nothing against Poirier, but the expectations that we had for Islam in that fight, especially knowing that it was not a Poirier in his prime, were sky high. You know what I'm saying? I was expecting Makhachev to really, destroy Dustin Poirier. And, like I said, nothing against Dustin Poirier, but I think this was a Poirier who's a bit more weathered, who's a bit slower on the feet, especially if you go back and rewatch, Dustin Poirier's fights against Khabib Nurmagomedov, his fight against Max Holloway, the rematch, his fights against Conor McGregor. You can tell this is a Dustin Poirier who, who's a little bit slower, who's obviously at the end of his career. So knowing that, and knowing that Makhachev right now is in his prime, I kind of expected a better performance from Islam Makhachev. But I did learn a couple things from that fight between Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev. One, Makhachev has insane grit. And I mean, I guess you can say that he showed that in the fight against Alexander Volkanovski, the first fight. But I mean, in a fight where he had to dig deep. And when I say dig deep, I'm not saying that Islam Makhachev was losing the fight against Dustin Poirier, that he was down on the scorecards. But, it was a fight where, he could not just submit Dustin Poirier in one round where, Dustin Poirier had moments where he himself started to land combinations, started to land punches. Moments where Dustin Poirier cut him up, in that fourth round, and Islam Makhachev had like this nasty cut in the middle of his face with blood pouring down, and where Dustin Poirier landed some, nasty hooks to the body. Like, it was not a very, I guess, clean fight. And even through that, Makhachev showed that he has enough grit to come back in the fifth round, get a nasty ankle pick, and then submit Dustin Poirier in the fifth round, which was incredibly impressive. And like I said, even though we were expecting more from that performance, when you think about the way he won, especially in that fifth round, you're impressed by it. You're really, really impressed by it. And I think one thing I realized also as well, our expectations of Makhachev are rooted in our, you know, on how we feel, I guess, about Khabib Nurmagomedov. I think we compare a lot of their performances to each other. But the one thing that we have to realize is that they're two completely, not completely, right? Obviously, they share similarities, but they're two very different fighters. They're two very, very different fighters. Islam Makhachev's a lot more technical. I don't think he's as dominant on the ground as Khabib Nurmagomedov. I don't think, but I think he's better of a striker. I think he has better boxing. I think he's more well-rounded. You know what I'm saying? So because their styles are different, I think that it also leads to a different outcome, even with not different outcome necessarily, but different type of fight, even with similar opponents or even with common opponents. And I think that that's something that we have to consider. Just because they fight the same guys and they're both grapplers doesn't mean that the fight's gonna turn out the same way. I think Makhachev, he's a lot more comfortable with his boxing. I think Khabib was a fighter that had heavy pressure. Makhachev, on the other hand, he's more on the back foot, kind of a counter striker. Really good combination, really good leg kicks. Khabib, Khabib, on the other hand, had some. He did not have the best hands. I know he dropped Conor McGregor, but his flurries were something to watch, you know what I'm saying? But Khabib was just so persistent, so incredibly strong with his takedowns, the way he would manipulate your body on the ground and then be able to find the submission with, like, it felt like pure strength. I think it looks a little bit more impressive than what Makhachev is doing to these guys. And because Makhachev is so well rounded, I feel like he's able to entertain areas of other fighters' game, which makes the fight look a bit more competitive and less impressive. But if you take that away, you'll realize that Makhachev is very, very, very impressive. You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, I think Makhachev is a lot more comfortable with his boxing, and a fighter could make him pay. Now, do I think Arman Tsarukyan is that fighter to make Islam Makhachev pay for him getting comfortable on the feet? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think most of you guys would agree that, Arman Tsarukyan doesn't have better boxing. Like I said, he's very explosive, has power, but doesn't really set up the shots the best way. I mean, he could catch Makhachev the way he caught Benio Dariush, where, like something very explosive, something very fast that you don't really see coming. That could happen. Now, is it likely? I don't think so. Personally, I do not think so. And honestly, I do not really see how Arman Tsarukyan wins this fight. He's not the better striker. He's not the better boxer. Potentially the better kicker, but like I said, does not really set them up well. He's not better in the clinch. Does not have better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So how does Arman necessarily win this fight? I guess he could make it incredibly close and hope to slide a decision. Yeah, I guess that could happen. Likely, in my opinion, no. The other thing as well is that Arman Tsarukyan does not have the greatest fight IQ. He's a very impulsive guy in and outside the cage. He himself admitted that the game plan went out the window in his fight against Charles Oliveira. And in that fight against Charles Oliveira, there's no way you take away from that fight that Arman Tsarukyan is ready for Islam Makhachev. Like, yes, he was able to beat Charles Oliveira very clearly. It was a very, very close fight, but I just didn't see enough for me to be like, yep, this guy, yep, he could beat Islam right now. He could. I don't see it. I don't see it. At no point did I feel like he hurt Charles Oliveira on the field, which is something that we've seen a lot of fighters do. He was able to control him on the ground, but I mean, is Arman gonna be able to take down Makhachev and control him on the ground? I don't think so. Maybe he's able to get at least maybe one takedown, and then Makhachev gets back up, but like I said, Arman's just not dangerous. That's the problem too. That Arman's just not. He's not dangerous enough. I think. Like I said, he has knockout power. He could knock you out. He probably hits harder than Makhachev, but doesn't have the better combinations. And I just think Makhachev has a lot more experience. And I guess people can say Arman can win with a really good game plan, but my thing is, like, what's the game plan? Like, what game plan do you see Arman Tsarukyan implementing that would, I guess, make you comfortable enough to pick him in this matchup? Because I can't think of one. I really can't think of one. And if you're, like I said, if you're just basing it off his performance against Poirier, I think you're mistaken. Honestly, I think you're mistaken. And I could see this fight potentially giving me, Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman vibes, and that's me being generous in terms of the fact that, like, two fighters who kind of have similar games, similar styles, but one has a clear finishing potential, which kind of lends itself to be a very, very close fight. Like, I guess Covington and Usman in this example, but one just always wins because they have clearly, they're just the more dangerous fighter, they're the more powerful fighter, and I could see that happening here. But I just think that Makhachev is a little bit too good right now. I don't think Arman Tsarukyan has shown me anything that makes me pick him in this matchup. And as much as it would be cool to see him win, I just do not see another guy. I think that Makhachev is such a great counter striker. He's so defensively sound. He's so hard to hit. And for Arman to make things happen, he's gonna have to be walking forward against Makhachev. And I think Makhachev is gonna counter him like really badly. Like I just do not see how Arman wins this fight. That's not to say that he cannot win this fight. Obviously, this is MMA. I'm not saying it's absolutely impossible. But the more I've thought about this matchup, the more I've thought about, okay, who has the power advantage? Who has the speed advantage? Who has the boxing advantage? Who has the experience advantage? Who has the fight IQ? Who's most likely to stick to a game plan? And it's not like I said, one of the great things you can take away from that Islam Poirier fight is that Islam showed a lot of grit in a fight where he didn't just submit a guy in the first round where yeah, he took Poirier to the ground, but he didn't finish him on the ground. Yeah, he controlled him for big portions of those rounds, and he did kind of outstrike Poirier, but I mean Poirier also had moments where he cut Makhachev in that fourth round, and Makhachev's bleeding, and you're like, man, is the tide about to change? Like, no, Makhachev was still able to win even after a round or a moment like that, and that gives me a lot of confidence in this matchup. And I think this could potentially be not necessarily an easier fight for Makhachev than that one, but I think this could be a cleaner fight where he takes a little bit less damage than he did in that fight against Poirier, and potentially even Volkanovski, because I think Volkanovski throws better combinations. I think he throws better combos, and I just don't see Arman Tsarukyan. I could see him landing a couple body kicks. I don't know. I don't see him putting it together in this fight. I really do not see him putting it together. So ultimately, guys, I'm gonna go with Islam Makhachev to win this matchup. I still haven't decided by how. I mean, I could see him getting a submission on the ground. I could see him knocking out Arman Tsarukyan, potentially maybe hurting him, dropping him. But I think he could also win by a decision. I think that's probably the most likely outcome in this matchup. I think that as much as we I think this fight could be close but clear. You know what I'm saying? Like, this fight could be close. It could be competitive in moments. I just don't see Arman being dangerous enough to beat someone like Makhachev in this matchup. And for that reason, I just cannot pick him. Like I said, I understand how people can see this fight being competitive. I don't see how people see Arman winning this matchup. I think Islam is very good. I think he's very dangerous. I think he's a lot more confident. I don't think this is. I used to say that this was his hardest matchup. I probably said that a week ago. Rewatching, the fights, I don't know. I don't think this is Makhachev's hardest fight. I really do not think so. I think that somebody like Poirier, if he moves up, I think that could be a guy that could potentially beat someone like Makhachev. The knockout power, the boxing, the combinations, the footwork, the aura. I don't see Arman Tsarukyan having that aura. I think he's a little bit too green. He looks a little bit too young. Maybe because he also has a baby face. And look, I know that first fight was very competitive, and I know that Arman was 22 years old in that first fight, and he was making his UFC debut, and he looked good too. But I mean, Islam also has improved a lot since that fight. He's a lot more dangerous than he was in that first fight against Tsarukyan, and I don't see. I don't take away enough from that Oliveira fight for me to be confident that he can beat Makhachev at this point. You know what I'm saying? So ultimately, guys, I'm gonna go with not Arman Tsarukyan. I'm gonna go with Islam Makhachev to win this fight. I want to know what you guys think. I think a lot of people are picking Arman Tsarukyan, which I'm kind of surprised about. I cannot pick him in this fight, guys. I cannot pick him. I think Islam is too good. I just think he can win in too many ways, and he's shown us so much. While with Arman, like, I feel like he's gonna have to show us something different, in my opinion, for him to dominate Makhachev and for him to beat Makhachev. Like I said, he could catch him with something explosive, with a fast punch, something like that. Obviously, that can happen, but I mean, we could basically say that about any fight, and I just do not see that happening here, guys. So I'm gonna go with Islam Makhachev to win this matchup. Like I said, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.